Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now in a prior video, we took a look at these Pitney rifle scopes in a first impressions video. Got them out of the box, looked at the general features, general construction, but at this point, I do need to get these mounted up, bring them to the range, and test them out, see how they perform for me. Now I do have two rifle scopes here. First off, here we have this compact combination unit. This is sort of that mil-spec style, but generally speaking, fairly reasonable, all things considered. This is a 2.5 to 10 times magnification and is, again, a fairly compact unit. And here, more of a traditional full-sized rifle scope. So here, this is a 3 times to 9 times magnification. This also comes with the scope rings. And so today, my goal, get both of these mounted, roughly zeroed in, and then get them to the range for some functional testing. And so a bunch to do. I'm curious about how these will perform overall. Now, I do have a couple of concerns right away, nothing significant, but things that are going to be considerations, and keeping in mind the fact that these are a very cheap, and I'm going to say budget-oriented optic. And so with that said, when we come back, we'll get into the mounting, and then I'll get these out to the range for some functional testing. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you, and if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now, before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at Pitney who did provide these for review. And so if you go back to my original video, I did go through these in detail. So I'm not going to cover all the fine details, with the exception being how I mount these and how they function out in the field. So if you want to see my preliminary thoughts and impressions of these, do me a favor, go back and check out one of my prior videos. But here today, as we move forward, I need to approach these each one at a time. So I'm going to put the compact scope aside for now. And at this point, I am basically going to go with the full-size scope as we get this mounted up. And so as we get into this, I will be mounting this on my Ruger 1022. Now, I do this for a couple reasons. First of all, very cheap to shoot and test with my new optics. So that's the first thing is, I can mount this up and learn a bunch of lessons and learn them the cheap way. And second is, well, I only have a couple of rifles, so I don't have too many choices to go by, but this to me is definitely the easiest way to go about this. Now, if you look at this in terms of the relative size, you'll see here that this is fairly large in overall length. It is definitely not compact. And once I get this mounted up, well, the question's going to be, with these rings, do I have the ability to see through to my iron sights? Now, I can tell you already, I definitely struggle with this particular rail. So this Weaver rail here is a little bit tight in terms of my ability to see on my iron sights in the first place. So I'll probably ignore that, although the fact is, this does come with, really, I would say, a scope ring that does allow visibility through to iron sights if they are tall enough. But in my particular case, as I mentioned, not really quite tall enough. You'll see that these rings do require a star bit, and in this particular case here, I do have myself a T15. So this is a T15 star bit. Should work out fairly well, and I'm going to start just by kind of hand tightening everything. And then at a later point in time, I'll probably figure out if I need to torque these up. So generally speaking, pretty straightforward. I'm just going to start to get things assembled, and then we'll see what it looks like on the rifle. Now, these rings do have a little bit of a shim right from the factory. It's going to be subtle, but it's there. You can see down inside there, just a little shim. That should help with really tightening down the inner diameter of the ring, as well as aiding in a little bit of grip to hold on to the tube of the actual scope itself. So that's kind of a nice little detail. Now, the nice thing about this Ruger 1022 and the way I have it set up in this stock, I do have the ability to kind of get this relatively level and pretty darn close, all things considered, as I go through this rifle mounting process without even putting this in a stand. And so you'll see here that this rifle actually does have a little foot inside the grip that can be lowered down, and then in combination with the bipod itself, I mean, I can get this pretty darn close. And if anything else, that means all I need to do is put a little shim below this foot, and I can get this pretty darn close to level. And then in terms of the horizontal direction, well, that's not going to be a problem, because this pretty much just needs to get rocked in the right direction, and I can get that pretty darn close. Now, not perfect science here, but close enough for my needs. Which means as I go to mount this scope, I can get it kind of close. And when I say kind of close, again, for me, I am not an expert. I do not need to be super precise, but at the same time, if I can get this somewhat close, that would be nice. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge, so I might just leverage the cap. And of course, this is half-assed. I don't have all the proper smithing tools I need for this operation, but again, this should get it pretty darn close and better than average. And as I take this and rotate it here, I mean, boom, there you go. Pretty darn close for my needs. Now, depending on how things go, I might struggle a little bit. I feel as though vertically, I tend to be challenged with this, and I wonder if I have a little bit of barrel droop on my particular Ruger 1022, which is something that can happen, but at the same time, this is good enough for now. Torquing down on these rings. It's going to 20 inch-pounds, which is not a lot, but probably more than it needs to be. Just making sure that they're even on both sides. There we go. Now, there is no indication in the user's manual of how far they want you to go. So to me, 20 seems reasonable. Again, making sure both sides even. And there we go. Now, on this particular stock, it does have an expandable stock, which I know for my body size and length of pull, I need fully expanded. And at this point, putting down the firearm. And if I were to close my eyes, get on the firearm, lean in, get to be to where I feel comfortable, and open my eyes, that seems pretty darn close. I might need to actually scoot this back just a touch. So, I mean, it's so close. Again, just getting comfortable. I mean, yeah, I feel like maybe just scooting it back a tiny bit might help, but it's so close, it's probably not worth getting finicky. So at this point where it's level, where it seems to be a reasonable relief away from my eye, where everything seems to be pretty comfortable for me, I think this is going to be the start of my setup, and I'm in pretty good shape. So all in all, this mounted up fairly easily, no problem. And the question now is about getting this zeroed. And so getting a bore laser set inside here, fairly straightforward. I do like to release this just so easy against it, and turning this on. This is a continuous beam, which I like. Now, for me to get things started on zeroing, I'm in my basement. This is literally exactly 10 yards. I have a target off in the distance, and I have my laser shooting out there, which is nice. And the good thing about this is, well, I can start to kind of figure out where I stand, and that's a good thing. So right now, my windage is actually almost perfect, and elevation is only off a couple of notches on the reticle. So if you get a quick look there, you can see the laser off in the distance. There's my target, just getting that lined in. And as you take a look at the reticle, there you go. So, I mean, not too bad. I'm just going to adjust my elevation, tweak the windage a little bit. And this at least gets me started today before I even get to the range. So these caps, I can feel are gasketed, which is nice. That'll help keep moisture out of everything. And so that's not a problem. That works out very well. And so here, twisting in the up direction. So again, the way I always remember this is if my shot is low, so again, the laser is low, click it up, bring my shot up. So that is what I'm doing here. And as I dial it in, very simple. And of course, I didn't need the target out there in the first place with the continuous laser. That's the nice thing about it. You could just use a nice plain white background, but having the target just kind of gives me a visual cue. Now, one thing I can say for sure, getting some impressions here, that my eye placement is going to be critical in terms of the accuracy and in terms of what the zero looks like. I need to make sure I absolutely hold that position, because as I move my head up and down, the beam is dancing above and below the crosshair. So that is greatly going to impact my accuracy when I'm at the range. And so that gets the 3x9 scope at least close. And at this point, I'm just going to protect the optics, and this is ready to at least make a trip to the range. Not perfect, but again, for my needs, pretty darn close. And I'm not an expert. Being a little bit off, I'm going to be off myself anyway. Not to add to my frustration. I mean, the more dialed in I can get my equipment, the better I'm going to be. But at the same time, I feel like that's going to be enough to get me to the range and understand this. And now for the military compact style. Now, I suspect I'm going to struggle just a little bit with the length of this and getting a good sight picture, but we'll see. Now, a couple things worth mentioning on this particular unit. This does have these caps which actually make it a little bit brighter. This is a yellow cap on your ocular lens, so that will give it a little bit of a brighter sort of feel. Now, in terms of mounting this, this will give me a little bit of flexibility, but I wonder already if it's going to struggle with this mount. Nope, spacing seems to be about right, so that's going to work out just fine. Now I'm going to slam this all the way to the back, which in reality is kind of behind my action a little bit. And I know people have opinions about that, but I got to get the length to my eye probably a little bit more adjusted. Yeah, I need to come way in on this, which might be okay, but I'm definitely getting my cheek more on the tube rather than on the stock itself. So we'll go with it for now and see how this works out. Now, setup on this is going to be a little bit easier, but also a little bit different. Of course, I don't have rings, so I don't need to get into all the leveling. This basically just sits right on here, good to go. Shorter, more compact. Actually, looks like it fits on here very well. And as I get on here, very similar to the other one where my laser is just a little bit low. So I got a little bit of an issue going on vertically, but not really too bad in the horizontal direction. And so again, as you look off in the distance, you can see the laser there. It is not too bad, all things considered, horizontal, or in other words, in windage, but in elevation, you can see the crosshairs. Obviously, it's a little bit low. So a good start again, not too big of a deal. And again, keeping in mind, this is roughly 10 yards. Now, something else to consider on this particular rifle scope, this does have a parallax adjustment, which I'm certainly not an expert, and I don't know exactly the right way to go. But what I can tell you is there's a 1 through 5 adjustment, and this goes a little beyond 1 to zero it out, and then it goes a little beyond 5 all the way out. So if I'm careful, I'm just going to put this on 1 exactly and just leave it there as I get this set up. And I think that's probably about right at this distance. Removing the caps here for both elevation and windage. Again, I know I'm mostly going to be messing with my elevation, but might need to fine tune the windage here. And getting back in on this, getting on that dial. All right, so that's real smooth, no problem. You can hear the positive clicks, so a nice audible click. And one thing that I do need to note on both of these are quarter click adjustment. So 1/4 MOA adjustment. It's actually fairly close. And that's pretty good. Does not take much. And if I were to mess with that parallax adjustment, oh yeah, that throws it way off. So that's a big consideration and something I am definitely going to have to pay attention to. But that's going to be real nice if I figure out the right way to use this at the range, because beep, 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 I'm going to be able to fix things on the fly. So a little bit of research that I will have between now and my time at the range, but generally speaking, setup complete, rough alignment, at least at 10 yards, that gets me hopefully hitting paper so that when I'm at the range, I can figure out where I'm at. And so the other thing this has is a red dot laser. Now I can of course choose what distance to zero this at. For me, I'm just gonna do it here. So again, getting back on target, and I'm just gonna take my Allen key, and I'm going to take this and literally dial it in on the spot. And real simple. I mean, so simple. Just match up my lasers. And so that's the nice thing again about having a continuous laser in your bore. And just like that, I mean, these are both fairly well dialed in. And what I would probably do is, if I could get some time at the range with this and really get the scope laser actually lined in, that would then pretty much do what I need to do in order to continue to make adjustments in the field without needing the bore laser, which is kind of cool. So this is a nice setup overall. I'm hoping this is going to work out fairly well for me, but this gets me pretty darn close in a mere matter of minutes, which is awesome. So just fine-tuning things, and I'm in a good spot. Now, I didn't quite make it to the range yet, and the first thing I'm finding is what's going to be annoying is these big, large knobs on the same side as the charging handle. So this is going to be in the way continuously. And as I was trying to get my bore laser out of here, I mean, you'll see, that really does put me in a position to need to mess around. But the good news is it does look like I can reverse the base. So even after all this setup, what I'm going to do is reverse this plate the opposite direction, go through all my same steps, and hopefully I'll be in better shape. Very simple, but fully reversed, which is nice. So you can see now at this point, the action is clear, which is awesome. And on top of it all, turning on the laser here and checking, this seems to have held zero perfectly. So no problems, and I'm back on track. And so at this point, let's get out to the range for some practical field use. And so now getting out to the range with my Ruger 1022 and these Pitney scopes. So here we're going to start with the military style scope. So this here is the 2.5 to 10 by 40 millimeter objective lens scope. So here you can see I am getting it ready, everything kind of getting dialed in. Now I did find that I had to take a couple of shots, roughly find myself on paper and make some initial adjustments, keeping in mind at first I'm at 25 yards. So 25 yards, taking sort of a center shot on the center mass or body of the target, just trying to kind of figure out where I'm at. Now this was a windy day, but I don't really think that had too much in the way of impact on my shots. It's really just getting used to where I'm at. Still on round one. It was actually a nice adjustment. I'm real close in windage. I need to come down in elevation. So bring my shot down. Should be better. Gotta be getting close here. And now just a couple more things to take into consideration. First, I am very far from anybody who really knows what he's doing here. I mean, I am very much a novice, but I'm learning. I'm actually gaining on things pretty well, getting pretty good understanding of how to adjust my scopes, get them dialed in, and it's definitely starting to come into play here. So things are trending in the right direction, but at the same time, I definitely still have a little bit of a learning curve. But again, here at 25 yards, not a bad place to start overall. Center mass, center of the target. Let's see how I did. So round one with the compact scope at 25 yards. You can see I started high and left. Keeping in mind I'm going for center mass, so I started high and left, started chasing it in, bringing it down, and finalizing with this tiny little group. I had just a couple of shots left, and you can see I'm just slightly low of center, but that was pretty good. So at this point, I should be able to hopefully place 10 in the number one. At least that's my goal. All right, second round of 10. Going for the number one at 25 yards. I know I need to come up just a touch, and hopefully I can get 10 solid shots here. Let's give it a go. Going live. Now, one thing you'll notice, this does have a cap both on the objective lens and on the ocular lens, which makes it a little bit yellow tint. I did find after a while I was better off without that and eventually removed it. But for the first couple of rounds, you'll notice I kept it on there. It actually was pretty good for the test, giving me the ability to really test this out in its different configurations. And again, overall, not too bad, getting things sighted in reasonably. Go. See how we did. All right, so at 25 yards, trying to hit them all in the number one, I felt me literally like push these. So that was bad on my part. I mean, that's shooter error, but you can see this actually looks pretty good. So at 25 yards, a reasonable little grouping. Let's go out to 50. And so now at this point, moving out to around 50 yards. I do like to sort of bounce between different distances and really try to get things lined in. So I sort of move from 25 to 50 and then eventually 100 yards as I get things sort of fine-tuned and refined. And you'll see, pretty straightforward. Now, I did find that the overall adjustment on this, very simple, no problem. This scope does have quarter click adjustment, and it is an audible click. This adjusts very simple, no problem. And keep in mind as well, I did not leverage the parallax adjustments. There we go. Now round three at 50 yards with the compact scope. Center mass there, you can see, not too bad. I mean, you know, that's maybe 5 or 6 inches. I mean, probably 5 inches total, and all in the box. I mean, I did catch a couple on the line, but I'm fairly happy with that. So let's see if I can land them in the number one now. Should be close. And so for somebody who's essentially a novice, to be able to get things dialed in fairly reasonably, I'm happy with that. I do definitely have a long way to go and plenty of practice to be had, but at this point, I can't really say that I'm having any problems with the scope itself. These Pitney scopes absolutely performing. Anything that strays off a target is simply from shooter error and not because of the optics. And so, yeah, I mean, a nice tight grouping, but I could clearly see I was adjusted too far to the left. So I was off in windage, elevation was almost perfect, and I just held it on the center here to the best of my ability. And you can see that's just user error and adjustment, my familiarity with scopes in general, so not too bad. So after 20 rounds at 25 yards and 20 rounds at 50 yards, it's time to put 10 rounds downrange to 100 yards. Let's see if I can hit any steel. Now, I should be close enough at this point and reasonably lined up, especially in windage. Maybe not exactly in elevation, but in windage to get myself darn close. And well, after all this, not bad. 7 out of 10. I'll take it. And as you take a look inside the reticle here, it is very effective. It gives you a couple of different aiming points, and I definitely like how clear it is. And so now moving forward, you can see we're turning the corner to the 3x9x40 scope. So this is more of a full-size scope. It's a little less compact, and I'm gonna kind of run a very similar way as I did to the military style scope. So again, here you can see as I move through this, I'm gonna go from 25 yards to 50 yards to 100 yards. So the first thing for me, the first 10 rounds downrange at the 25-yard distance, I am going essentially for a neck or a head shot here, trying to get it dialed in, taking my time, making some adjustments. Again, similar to the military style scope, this is very easy to adjust, no problem. And you'll see that after all of this, it actually works out pretty well. But this again, having quarter click adjustment. And after all of this, fairly reasonable. You can see on my target here about a 1x1 square, hitting everything right where I wanted to hit it, right in that headshot. I am very happy with this as a start. Now, keep in mind, I did lose a couple of them early on, but after an initial adjustment, no problem. So for round 7, I jumped out to 50 yards. So putting 10 rounds downrange, you can see here I am essentially going for a neck or a head shot, and at this point getting everything continually dialed in. Now I had to make a couple of minor windage adjustments, a few elevation adjustments, and by the end of all of this, not too bad, all things considered. So again, the Pitney scope, very nice. This scope does have quarter click adjustments, very similar to the military style scope. They're audible clicks, and it's very easy to figure out your adjustments. So generally speaking, very nicely done from Pitney. And with that, the results are in. After 10 shots, going for the upper neck, not too bad. You can see these did spread out just a little bit, but I pretty much ended up with about a 4x4 square with a couple of shots that strayed a little bit. So at 50 yards, I'm not terribly disappointed with that. Actually pretty good for my given capabilities. For my 8th set here, you can see going out at 50 yards, trying to pinpoint the number 2, speeding up now. At this point where I'm getting things dialed in, I'm increasing my speed, still trying to maintain accuracy. I really don't need to make too much more in the way of adjustments. I think I have everything pretty well where I want it. So again, the Pitney scope doing a nice job getting me on target. I'm starting to feel pretty good. And here, not too bad. Mostly all in the number 2. Ballpark, a 2.5 by 2.5 inch square, and in some cases even tighter. Not perfectly on center, but at the same time, most of my shots ending up right inside my target area. I am absolutely happy with this. Anything outside of the target is user error and not the fault of the scope. But again here, moving to round 9, bringing it back into 25 yards just to see where things are landing. Again, aiming for that number 2 and greatly increasing my speed. Well, in terms of the overall accuracy, again, I'm starting to feel really good. This is looking about perfect. So my ability to get the scope really lined in, very easy. I had no problem, no difficulties. The Pitney scope seemingly holding 0 pretty well, and I am definitely seeing the target nicely. The reticle, fantastic. Everything about this working out very well. And so for the very end of this, going out to 100 yards, well, let's see how we do throwing my shots downrange at a reasonable clip, about as quick as I can get away with reasonable accuracy. And all in all, well, how did I do? Not great, 2 out of 10, a little bit of an adjustment issue, but I did find that unfortunately, I hadn't tightened down enough on the front end of the scope, and I do think it was wandering on me a bit. So again, more user's error, not on the scope, but all in all, fantastic experience. And so, all right, guys, there you have it. A look at a couple of scopes from the company Pitney. Now, again, budget line, budget items, but very effective. You know, I've said it on my channel before. A lot of times, as somebody who's new to firearms, if you're like me, it's like drinking through a fire hose. There are so many things you need to get into, from the firearm itself to your safe and all your ammo and all the little supplies and your range bag, and you add it up. Things just get expensive, and they get expensive quick. And that's also the case if you're even, advanced and you go from firearm to firearm to firearm trying new things. Sometimes you don't know what's going to work, and you just need to get started. And I do have to say, these Pitney scopes are effective for the money. They do a nice job. They're reasonably priced, but they get you moving and moving in the right direction. And again, for a novice, I was able to get these sighted in just fine. Both of these actually really, really good. Now, at the end of it all, I'm really digging this little military style scope. I've never used anything like this. I have used other scopes that are more of your sort of standard size, but in this case, I love the fact that this is compact. I love the fact that it performed, has that auxiliary laser if it ends up being useful, and on top of that, with more experimentation, I will learn how to use the parallax. Now, I do have to say, I don't think I'm shooting out far enough at this point, only going out to 100 yards, where that really does truly come into play. But again, I'm just a novice. I have to figure that out and figure out what works for me. Now, all in all, I did make some fundamental mistakes, little things, but again, I was able to correct them, keep myself on paper, and get everything lined right in. And that worked out extremely well with these Pitney scopes. A couple last things worth mentioning. These do obviously have the illumination modes, which I did not really use. I mean, I have the ability to light up that reticle, either red or green. I found I didn't really need that. It would have been nice to experiment with it. I kind of wish I did, mostly for the quality of this video, and so I had talking points to it. So I really don't have too much to go by there. But again, these do have the ability to adjust from red or green in different intensities. But again, not a big deal. The fact that you have that reticle inside with all the different sort of layers to it and the ability to line things in, again, very effective. So to the people at Pitney, thank you very much for the opportunity to take a look at these. I do greatly appreciate it. And for the rest of you, if you like this content, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless channel, which is more of my primary gear. On that channel, I cover everything from hiking, camping, and backpacking excursions, all the gear that goes with it. So from sleep systems, shelter systems, knives, axes, backpacks, flashlights, you name it. That's my Outer Limitless YouTube channel. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.